to have you here, Abel, and that should be enough from me for now. Yeah, so keen to hear what you have to share.
All right. Well, thank you, Yosha. That's a beautiful introduction. Yeah, my name is Abel Bean. I'm a senior guide here at the Teaching Drum Outdoor School, and I came here, very easy for me to remember. I came here January 1st in 2000. So it's been almost 25 years since I've come to the school. Before that, I was working as a school teacher. I taught mathematics and physics in high school. And I also was an avid soccer player. I coached a lot of soccer. I even went to Germany a couple times to go watch soccer and learn from some of the coaching there. So I had I grew up a sort of, well, we would say a normal life here in the United States. I lived, grew up in a medium-sized town. And at age 35, I gave up everything, sold everything I had, and I went on a seeking journey. And I ended up here at the school about a year after that I did all that. So I was 35 when I got here. I immediately went into my first year long, and from then on, I worked my way into staying here and finding a way to apprentice with Tamarack, and I've been working on the program ever since. And so first, yeah, thank you, Yosha, for inviting me to do this, and thank you all for coming. We're going to talk about wigwams, which is has turned into a really big passion of mine of learning about and building and living in these structures. And so I'm going to share that with you, that story with you today. Okay, so let me get started. Let me get my pictures up here. And let's see. Okay, so I want to start off with, is everybody able to hear me all right? Am I doing okay?
Yeah, that works.
Okay, great. All right, so I want to start off with just honoring some elders that had a big influence on me. This is me in my first year. So this is when I first came to the teaching drama. And I'm
wait a second. We don't see the pictures.
Oh, I see.
I thought you were asking if we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Let me see. Maybe I didn't share my. Let me share my screen. Okay.
I want to see you then.
Yeah. Okay. Now we'll get it going, right? All right. Here we go.
Yeah, that's your screen.
Yes. Thank you.
Photo.
Okay, great. That makes it a little different, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Here we go. So here I am. This is my first year when I was doing the Wilderness Guide program. This is before I met Yosha. And this woman is, her name was Mary Asinaway, and she was affectionately known as Mani. And she was an Ojibway woman who lived up in Canada, and she would come visit us a few times a year. And the neat thing about her for me was that when she was a young child, she lived in these wigwams with her family. And she would share stories of what that was like. And she loved the wigwams we were building and would really encourage me to explore that. So I just wanted to show her. This is another elder of mine who has passed away. This is Tony Kimnitz. And he came into my life and just talked about the tracking and all the other outdoor stuff. And he loved the wigwams and would always ask me all sorts of questions and want me to explain everything to him, and just a great inspiration in my life. And then here is Tamarack with us. This is my first year long. And just have to, I have nothing, I cannot say enough about all the things that I've learned and how grateful I am from Tamarack and all the time that he spent mostly sending me back to redo what I did on these wigwams and always have me strive to learn more and do better on them. So, all right. So what are wigwams, you know, and what is the big deal about them, right? And so we have a rich history of building these in the program. We've built all kinds of them. So, but they are essentially a basket shelter. The word wigwam translates simply to basket shelter. And you can see here, this is the frame, and it's really an upside down basket. You can imagine, you know, when we're small children, we like to build shelters in the living room. We put blankets over the chairs, and this is really that concept. It's just a basket structure that we cover with various types of covering to protect us from the elements. And so very simply, that's the basis of a wigwam. And this wigwam here would be considered a very traditional Ojibway style Northwoods wigwam. And it's there, this one is a frame and birch bark. And that was highly regarded because it's very simple to take this apart. You can roll up these panels and put them on your backpack, and you can head to another place and then just set it right back up again. And so it allowed the Ojibway people in the Northwoods to be really mobile. They were semi-nomadic. They were able to follow the food sources during the changes of the seasons. And it just made an ideal lodge for that type of environment. And so just different scenes. This is showing the wigwams in different angles, different times. You also don't need to use birch bark. You can use other types of bark. This is cedar bark in the bottom area here, in this area down here, and then with a birch bark top. Here's another example of a wigwam with, this is grass, using grass to cover it with a wigwam, with the bark top. And this is all grass here, which I'll show you how that works. And then, believe it or not, this is actually a wigwam too. There's a wigwam frame inside of this shelter here. And then this outside here is all covered with peat dirt. And that peat dirt creates an insulation. And this actually is a winter wigwam. It has a fire hearth inside. There's an opening on the top for the smoke to go out, and a typical winter shelter. Here's an example of a wigwam where we did it with all grass, except for the very top cone here. But it's not the traditional shape because we put a cone on top, which I'll show you later how that's done and why we do that. And so, yeah, this is our summer camp at Nishnashta, where the Wilderness Guide students live. And this is just some examples of the shelters. Here's a typical camp here with wigwams, and then we have a lean-to here. This is often what you'll see here at the school in our camps, where people come out to live for extended periods of time. And also just all the different people who have come here. This is a group from about 5 years ago. And they're demonstrating the strength of the basket design. So here you have 5 people hanging on the wigwam, just to show you how strong they are, which is part of the basket design. a lot of different people over the years, been almost 25 years, where we've built shelters almost every year. And so just getting the kids involved is really important to us. And here, these children, these are two girls. They were 7 years old when they were working on this lodge here. More children. Here's an inside look of what it's like when you're inside with people in the lodge. Another proud group of seekers who just finished this lodge here behind them. And this is me in my first year. And this is the lodge that I lived in. And I want to share a story about what that was like for me. When I first came to the school and I was, living in the camp, we started working on these wigwams, and it was a lot of work. It's, you have to go out and gather all the materials, and there's a lot of preparation to put all this together. And I was not really that interested. It wasn't something that was dear to my heart, but that soon changed. And it was a night similar to this. I was in my wigwam after a full day of working and playing, and I, I think I hear I'm writing a letter, and I ended up going to sleep just like in any normal night. And it was somewhere around midnight where I awoke in the middle of the night, and I could hear outside the wigwam a lot of wind coming. The wind was blowing, it was getting stronger and stronger, and it woke me up. And I was also hearing off in the distance thunder. And here in the North Woods of Wisconsin, we can get these thunderstorms that build up over the plain states, many hundreds of miles away. And then over the middle of the night, they roll over us, they come by, and they can be very violent. The storms can be just about as strong as you can imagine. And so, and this particular night, that's what happened. The thunder got louder and louder, and the winds picked up, and it got to a point where we were getting lightning, where the whole sky would light up with lightning. So it would just, and I was looking out my door, this area right here, and when the lightning would go, you could see everything. It was so bright, would just light everything, and I would see branches flying by and stuff flying by. The wind was blowing so hard, it was just whipping things, and I was hearing branches breaking off trees. And this was went on for a half hour. So I was watching this, and then the rain came, and the rain came so hard, it was just pounding rain. And it was the kind of rain that if you are standing out in it, you would be soaked from head to toe within 5 minutes. It was just pouring, and the lightning would light up again. And then I could see, I could see water just running across the ground, sheets of water. It was just flooding. It was coming down so hard. Meanwhile, I'm in my shelter, this very shelter here, and I'm sitting there and I'm laying in there, and I'm noticing that inside my lodge, I'm perfectly dry. There was no water coming in whatsoever. The wind, it was very still in my lodge. I'm looking out the door, and the wind is just howling and blowing by. But inside my lodge, it was perfectly still. And the rain was just beating down on top of the lodge, but all the water was just shedding off the lodge, and I was perfectly dry. And I very quickly realized how comfortable I was and how at peace I was, just laying there in my sleeping bag, nice and cozy and warm. And I felt completely nurtured and cared for. And I just continued to watch the storm out the door, going, doing its thing. And I was just like, I had such an amazing feeling where it just reminded me of what really is important in life. What do you really need to be happy and fulfilled? And that was one of those moments where I realized, I was like, shelter. This is why you want shelter. And I just immediately felt this kinship with my ancestors all the way back to the beginning of time for humans, when we built these shelters, and this instinctive yearning to have shelter that we can go to. And from that moment on, I just felt really connected to the land, to, you know, I finally made it. Like, I was there living in the woods, and I fully felt it, like, oh, this is what it's all about. It's very simple, all we need in life. And we don't need all these complicated things in the outside world. And so I just laid there, just so in peace, and I went right back to sleep. And then the storm raged on, and the next day I got up, you know, and from then on, I had a complete different opinion about lodges and working on lodges, and so that's how that came about. Okay, so I'd like to go into next would be, let's see here. Let me go into how we make these lodges. I'm having a hard time with this menu in my way. Let me see here. Just a second. Oops. All right. Okay. All right. So the most the biggest part of making a wigwam is the actual frame, and understanding how to make the frame. Once you understand the principles of it, it's really easy to go into any wooded environment and find the materials you need and make a frame yourself. So the first step with making frames is to figure out what size you want for a wigwam. You know, how big do you want this to be? And I learned from experience that you want to make it as small as possible, or only as big as you need it to be. So it may look like that's a small space, but that actually is plenty comfortable for 2 or 3 people to sleep in, and 4 or 5 people to sit in, let's say during a rainstorm, and be able to feel comfortable and relax. So the first step is to draw out your circle, find out your location, and then mark out where you're going to want to have your wigwam. And then from there, you want to be able to mark it out and decide where you're going to put these poles that you're going to build the frame from. And so what we look for is, like, where do you want to have the entryway come in? Which way do you want your door to face? So that's a consideration to think about. Most of the time, you'd like to have it with the morning sun, early afternoon. So, you know, southeast entrance. And so that's what this is right here. That's where I start from. And then I put in the 4 poles here. And then from there, I mark in, where do I want these arches to fit in? And so this shows where I would have an arch going from our left to right here, and then an arch going forward and back. So we'd have 4 arches. So those are the 4 main arches of the frame, and I call those the major arches. The next thing you'll need is you'll need to have good saplings for building the frame. And what you're looking for with these saplings is you want them to be long and have a very, slight taper, meaning that they're long and narrow all the way to the top. So you don't want to have a fat bottom and have it come to a point very shortly. You want it as long of a taper as you can have. And that's what we're doing here. We're looking at different poles. We're selecting what was gathered, and we're selecting out of that what we'll use for the first part of the frame. Then you want to get these poles ready to be able to bend. And there's a process we do. We just go ahead and you pre-bend them. And this pole here is stuck in between the crux of these 2 trees. And then you work the pole by bending it. And this stretches the fibers on the outside of the pole and compresses the fibers on the inside of the curve. And this is really important to do, so because it takes a lot of work to shape the frame to be exactly the shape that you want. So it's important to pre-bend. And this is one of the ways you can do it. Okay, so then to get your poles into the ground, we build a mallet, a pounding device here. And then we have a post that will drive into the ground in the spot where you want your pole to come out. So here's one of the saplings that's placed in a hole that we already put in. And here's the other section we're doing. And it's just a amount of force of getting that post down in there deep enough, and then we pull that out to create the hole. And then you always have to let the kids do it because they want to be a part of the whole thing. So one of the things you'll notice is that this is at an angle. We're not putting it straight up and down with the hole that we're building. And that's so that our post will go in at an angle. And I'll show you more there. You can see here that this is going to curve out, and this one is curving out. It's not just going straight up. And the reason that is this, when you're sitting in this area inside the lodge, you have more headspace. It's more comfortable to have the curved space. So this gives you a lot more functional room inside the lodge. And I'll show you more of that in a minute. The other thing that it does, and here we go. This is just showing us how we bend the poles to get the shape we want. Sometimes it takes more than 2. This is the whole gang getting together doing it. And so here you show we have finished putting the first 2 arches in. Okay. And these poles here, we put these in there to get this nice arch shape. We want it to be as symmetrical as possible. And so we use these poles to pry into the frame to get that shape that we're looking for. And just a different, that shows about the width of the doorway. It'll be comfortable to crawl in and out of here width-wise. And then once we have those set in place, then you go ahead and you go to the other 2 main arches here. And so now, and you can see here that we're trying to get these arches to be symmetrical as much as possible. And so you have these posts in here that help to, like say this is going down low here. We just put this post in to help push that up. And also we use strings to tie a pole on the frame to help get the shape. So this string is tied to a tree off to the right. And so here we are. Now we have the 4 poles, main poles put in the major arches, right? And there's different ways of tying this, but you tie these all together to hold that shape. And it's just more examples of showing where we're putting strings on to help pull on this and get the shape that we're looking for. Okay, so after we put in the 4 main poles, and then we go into what I call the minor arches, and you'll see there's 4 more arches we're putting. There's one here and one out here, and then this one here and this one over here. And so this completes the basic shape of the frame. But this isn't finished yet, because if you were to put weight on this, all the arches would just bow out. So what we do is we add, well, first before that, this is different materials that we tie up with. This is inner bark from basswood, a linden tree, and it makes a great cordage. It's very simple to get, and it's very strong, easy to twist. And there's only 2 joints that you need to be able to tie. One is when you have 2 poles crossing each other, and then other is when you're trying to lash 2 poles together. So it's really simple to do. This is spruce root. This is another way we lash poles together. And showing the 2 different knots that we use. Okay, so after you have the 8 arches put in, the next step is to put in these rings around and tie those on. And what that does is that keeps that gives tension to the arches. So when you put weight down on the arch wants to expand, but the rings, these poles that you put on the side, provide tension on that so that doesn't stretch out. So that's what gives the lodge its strength. And some examples to look at, some detail things here is when you can't get a pole that goes all the way around, so you have to add extra poles to do that. And what you do is, it's important to know that you want to overlap these the bases of these poles from at least 1 over. So you see how this one goes to here and this one goes to here. That's an overlap. Over here is an example. Right here, I have the 2 base ends of these coming to 1, and you don't want to do that because that will disrupt the shape. It'll put tension on this here, and you'll get an irregular shaped area on the lodge. And this is something that you want to think about when you're building these, is that the more symmetrical you can make the lodge, the more it will distribute forces throughout the frame, and the longer it will last. So you want to avoid this and look to do this when you're putting these rings on. So here's an example of the frame now that has all the rings on it. And once you have those rings on it, then you can release all these other support things that you have to get the shape, because once the rings are on, that locks the shape of the lodge in place. Okay, so the last step for the frame is to put in the moisture barrier. And what this is just we're digging a trench around the base of the lodge, and then we put it in a waterproofing barrier. And here it's birch bark, but you could use any other kind of bark too. And this goes throughout the whole outside of the lodge. You can see here the steps of it. Using a stick to dig our trenches. And then when it's finished, we sew it to this bottom rung here, going around. And what you're seeing above the ground is about the same distance below the ground that we have the moisture barrier. And this is an important step to do, because what happens let me go back to this one. When the rain comes and the water is shedding off the lodge, all the water of the lodge sheds off, and then it drops right into this area here. So this area in rain gets very wet. And in sandy soils like we have here, the water will wick through into the lodge area, and you'll have a very damp ground here inside the lodge if you don't have a moisture barrier. So this is really important to have for comfort, a dry space inside the lodge. So here's another just picture of a finished frame here. And there is the frame ready now for doing a covering. So this is the basics of how we put our frames together. Okay. Oh, one more little thing here, a little tip. This is the post that we push in, that we knock into the ground, and then we pull it out to put in our poles. And oftentimes these get stuck and they're very difficult to pull out. So this is a little trick we do. We get a lever and tie a rope onto it, and then together we can get that out. I just put that in there because it's kind of fun to see that. All right. Okay, so yeah, and then the next step is how to cover the lodge. We need the lodge to be covered to protect us from the environment. And in this case, this is the original wigwam that I've shown you. Now, in our area, again, we have a lot of birch trees here. And so we have access to harvesting birch bark. It's a very simple process. It's something we do. You can only do it in a certain time of the year. And here it's around June, the end of June, beginning of July, in the hottest time of the summer. And that's because the bark will peel off the tree during that time. And it's just a matter of putting in a cut on the top and the bottom, a horizontal cut, and then put in a vertical cut here with your knife. And then the rest is just getting your hands under there and peeling the bark back. And this, we go as high up the tree as we can to get as much. And this is some pictures of some people in the past getting up high on the ladders, but you can get 4 or 5 panels from each tree. And I'm often asked, does this kill the tree, taking the bark off? And the answer to that is sometimes. Most of the time, though, around 70% of the time, the tree will survive taking the bark off, but of the birch trees. But they, especially if they are in a wooded environment where there's not direct sunlight on them. But when we gather bark here in the North Woods, we go to areas that are going to be logged. All these trees are slated to be cut down. Birch trees are harvested when they're around 50 years old and used for paper. And so we get permission from the loggers to go in and strip the bark off the trees before they cut them down. So there are ways here that we can get bark without unnecessarily harming the trees. Okay, the other thing that you need to make these lodges is spruce root. And so what this person here is doing, they're digging in the ground in the spruce forest, and they're actually looking for these roots here. And this is an example of all the roots you can get. So all these little things here are roots that he's digging up from this one area. And that's what we're hunting for. And when, so we take the root, we strip the bark off the roots, and then we split it. And that's what this guy is doing here. He's splitting the root. And then you coil it up, and you can dry, and you can use that 10 years later, 20 years later even. You just re-soak it, and then it becomes soft again, and it's makes for a great cordage. And here is a good close-up view of how you split. It's just done by hand. It's actually pretty simple, and it's a nice meditative practice. So that root is used for sewing these panels together. So this is a series of panels. This is 4 panels together. And we put these posts in the ground here to help support this. And this is another picture showing the backside. And you can see the root here, how it is sewing these 2 panels together. Let's see, I have some notes here to show. Yeah, you drive these posts into the ground, and that's what holds the panels together as it's shown in the picture. And you make, you sew together 4 panels or 5, depending on you need about, half a dozen of 4-panel ones and a half dozen 5-panel ones. But you make about 15, 20 of these. And then on the end, you split out cedar sticks, and you get a cedar stick on the end that you sew on. And this is so that you can tie it onto the lodge. And I'll show you pictures of how that goes. So here they are. You have one person on each side. And so you work together by using an awl and poking the holes through, and then pushing and pulling the root through. So this is an awl that she's using here to make the hole. And you can see the awl here. And it's pretty simple. You push it through, and the other person on the other side pulls it through so it lays flat. And so once you have those done, this is a 4-panel, and then they store them. So that right here they have I think 5 panels ready, and they're just continuing to do that until they get all that done. And then here is splitting some cedar. So this is a cedar in where we live. We have what's called northern white cedar, and this is one of the sacred trees of the area. The Ojibway named this tree the grandmother tree. And the beauty of it, it has 2 things about it that are really valuable. One is that it splits really well. It will split evenly. And the second is that it's really bendable. You can bend it, and especially with heat, you can make all kinds of things with it. So here's just showing how we split these out. And from there, we sew those on the end of these panels with the birch, or with the spruce root. And there's what it looked like when it's finished. All right, so then once you have your panels done, it's just a matter of tying them onto the lodge. And it's a bit of a puzzle piece here, but let's see if I can explain this. There's actually 3 of these panels here on the bottom. So there's one that starts on this side of the door, and it goes all the way around to here. And then there's another one. You see this stick here goes all the way over to here. And then this is another one. So there's 3 of them that are put on, and they're tied right onto the frame with spruce root. And then after you do that, you do another set like this, and this is tied on here to a stake, and then also tied onto the frame here. And this goes over this side over to here. And I did some drawings here back in, I'm not that great of a drawer, so we'll see how this works here. But so this shows, this shows the top view of the lodge here. This is the doorway going in, and then here is one panel that goes to this point, and then you overlap with another panel, and so on all the way around to the other. So that's what I was just describing. And then you put a second layer here that arches like this, and then another one on this side, and in the back, and then on this side, so you have all 4 sides done. And oops. And that's what they're doing here. They're putting in this set of panels here. There's another one over here, another one on the back, and then they're putting the last of the fourth panel here. And then after that, it's a matter of putting on the ceiling or the roof. And then so now we just start stacking them on layer on each side up like this. And you can see how they're overlapping each other like that on the top. And to make these really waterproof, it's what we call double coverage. And that is the top of this panel here is underneath the end of this panel here. So the top of this panel is right here. And the top of this panel is up here. And then the top of this panel is up underneath the other one. So every point of the lodge has 2 layers of bark on it. And then you have the final piece on the top. And you can see it takes a lot of root here. This is all spruce root that we use to tie it down, to anchor it down to the stakes that we put in on the outside. There's another picture of it here. So you could see going back, when the rain comes, the water will shed off the lodge and it'll drip right here. So this area of the lodge is very wet in the rain area. A lot of moisture right here. And this is why we have the moisture barrier underneath, so that that doesn't go into the lodge. And here's just showing putting on the last pieces, the last panels. And this is what it looks like from the inside. And then those are some proud people who are guarding their entrance to their lodge. So yeah, and these are actually this year's students. So all right, so that's how we do the bark lodges. And I'm going to show one more lodge process or covering that we do. And let's see here. Okay. So wigwams are used in all sorts of different environments. They're mainly, though, used in wooded environments. And you don't always have access to birch bark like we do here in North America. So there are other materials that Native people used, and one of them is grass. So this is a wigwam with a cone added to the top, and I'll explain why that is. But I just wanted to show you how that's done. And you start by going out and gathering the grass. You find, you see that this is actually not a true grass. This is a sedge. Sedges they look like grasses, but they're actually not. They don't grow in the same way as a grass does. But sedges in North America last a lot longer. And I do believe that sedge is also what was used in a lot of the thatched roofs that you see in Europe and some of the older buildings in Europe. So it's a matter of going out and finding these places where you have the sedge and then gathering it and then transporting it and to where you're going to build your lodge. And here is the sedge has been laid out so that it can dry. And we want to do that because as it's drying, it'll change its characteristics. And so in order for it to be stable to use on the lodge, we want to dry it first. And then once we have it dry, then you take bundles and we tie bundles. And what this is here is just a handful of grass, about this much in diameter. And we tie the end here together. This material right here is just rawhide. It's deer skin that's been scraped the hair off and then sliced thin. And you tie this bundle together and lock it off, and you get a bundle like this that'll stay together on its own. And you do that, and you make a lot of these. It takes a little over 1,000 of these to cover a lodge. So with 4 or 5 people, it takes like 2 or 3 days to put those together. Okay, and then you tie it onto the lodge, and it's a 2-person job. One person has the bundles ready and puts them in place, and then the other person does the wrap. And I don't know if we could see this very well, but this is the rawhide wrap that's going. So it starts here, it's tied to here, wraps around, goes back around the post again, and then comes around, wraps over the front, goes over the back, and then wraps around the front. And so it's just very simply wrapped on like that. And this shows the backside here of the wrap. So this is coming from in between. These are the bundles here. This comes in between the bundle, goes over the top, wraps over the front of that bundle, comes underneath, goes over the top, wraps over the front of that bundle, comes out from underneath, goes over the top, and so on. Right? And it's a pretty simple process, and it doesn't take long. It actually takes much shorter time to put it on the lodge than it does to make the bundles. But here you see they're tying. This one crew is going around the bottom rung, and then they're following right here on the next rung over. And again, you do the same thing where we have double coverage. So this bundle here goes all the way down to the ground, and this bundle here goes all the way down to here. So everywhere on this lodge, you'll have double coverage of grass. And then you take a break and have some fun. And then have some more fun. And just some different pictures of seeing what it looks like here. You know, this is 3 rungs up now. And what it kind of feels like when you're inside the lodge. The grass is one of my favorite because of the smell that it does. It has a really beautiful aroma to it. And also it's very mosquito proof. The mosquitoes cannot get through the grass bundles. So, and here, the lodge is at a certain point here where the angle is reaching what we know that if we keep on adding grass up here at this angle, it would not be able to shed water. It can only shed water if it's 45 degrees or less. So you would either put on a birch bark roof over it, like in this case. So this is just simply the putting the shingled panels of birch bark, or you can do the other, and that is to put a cone frame on top, which is what I'm doing here. And you see that cone is just a series of poles that are tied into the frame here, and then more rings around the outside. And so now you can take the bundles of grass and you can tie up and go right up the cone here. And so this angle here never is greater than 45 degrees. And so that keeps the grass, allowing the grass to shed water. So this angle right here is really important. So this angle here is not greater than 45 degrees, the angle from the horizontal to this down here. And just more pictures of people working on these lodges. And then we built a cap for it and placed the cap on top. And we're done. And this is kind of shaggy looking. It's pretty, but as soon as it in about a week, it'll calm down and relax, and it'll look like this. Yeah, and there's our grass lodges. Okay, so one more thing, and I have just a little bit of time here, so I'm going to go into this. I wasn't sure if I could do this, and that is you can build these lodges using the same concept. Let me hear. And you can make these lodges to be insulated. Oh, that's not going to work the way. No, didn't mean that. Yeah, my technical skills are kind of low level here. All right, here we go. Okay. So here is the start of another wigwam frame, right? So we're just putting together the frame, and you'll notice that there's a pit here in the ground. And so this is what is known as the inner frame. So we're building a frame that we're going to cover with insulative material. And so we have this inner frame here, and then we build a second wigwam frame on the outside. So here's the inner frame here, and then there's a second frame being built outside of that. And you see this, they're putting in the arch here over the top. And so you could build a second frame, which is this. And here you can see it. So here, it's kind of hard to see though, but here is the inner frame here. And then on the outside is another frame. And so from that point, we cover the inside frame with some kind of covering. It could be birch bark, or it could be grass, or it could be other materials. We use here bulrush, and sometimes we can use cattail. I'm not sure if you have that in Europe, but this is a smoke hole being built right here. This area, this angle here, will be open for smoke to go through. And here they're putting the bark around that. And you can see that this is insulated material. This is the inner frame here with the bark on it. This is peat dirt on the outside going out to the outer frame. And so that peat dirt is about 30, 40 centimeters distance. And you can see here's the inner frame and outer frame. They're insulating this right now. And then here's the lodge completely insulated. So this bottom part, we use peat dirt that we dig out of the bogs. We let it drain and dry, and it's very insulative. And then the top here, this is all sphagnum moss that we gather from the bogs and dry that. And so this is a fully insulated lodge with the smoke hole here. And here is the beginning of putting on the outside bark covering. And then this is, okay, so, so this is the finished outside, what it looks like when it's done. Then the other thing to do is to build a trench with an air tube in it. This is a tube here of birch bark and protected by some sticks to help keep it from collapsing. That tube gets brought up all the way up into the middle of the lodge, where we have a fire hearth built. You can see the tube coming into the doorway there. And then this is a coned shape center where that tube comes into and feeds into the cone here. And here you see the cone here, and you see the tube is going to come in right here at the middle of the cone. And then once that's all built, then we clay that all in with clay. And then now you can have a fire in here. There's an air vent feeding this fire, and with burning just hardwood, you get a smokeless fire inside the lodge. And this is what a full fire looks like during the when you have it really running. And so, you know, our temperatures here in the middle of the night could be minus 25 degrees Celsius, but in the lodge with a fire like this, it's can be, let me see here, I gotta convert. Yeah, inside the lodge, you can go all the way up to 30 degrees Celsius, no problem. So it could be very, very cold outside, but you could be in the lodge and have all your clothes off and be quite comfortable. So another use that the native people in this area did, they had these lodges that they had fire in during the white season. Okay, so that covers all what I wanted to share about how we build them, how we, you know, what kind of materials and how we use them. The other thing that I just want to end this with talking about how these are used. This is a shared space for the seekers. You know, the seekers come here in the beginning of the year. They don't know each other. It's a brand new you know, group for them. And so they start off in their own tents. They have their own space. But after about 2 months, after working on building the lodges, they move out of their tents and now they move into lodges and now they're living together in the lodges. And this progresses because, you know, there's 2 or 3 summer lodges and there's like 1 or 2 people in each lodge. But then when the wintertime comes, everybody shares the same lodge. All 4 or 5 people come to live in the same lodge. And this is because it's much more efficient to share 1 fire to stay warm with than it is to have 3 or 4 fires. And this idea of being able to live that close together day in and day out is a big part of the Wilderness Guide program experience. Learning how to live with each other in that close of proximity has a lot of beautiful life lessons. And so this idea of sharing space, living together like this is really a big part of the Wilderness Guide program experience. And living in the lodges is what brings that about really strongly. So, okay, so that's it on that. Let me stop sharing this. Oops, what's going on? Yeah, so Johanna, I'm ready to go into questions.
Yeah, the applause. It was a great talk. Thank you for all your knowledge and your experience that you shared, Abel. So I'm so grateful.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yeah, and thanks, Yosha, for spotlighting us. Yeah, wow, that was so much information. I doubt that I could go outside now and build one for myself, but yeah, one of the questions actually was how long does it take for either one person or some persons to build one lodge from beginning to the end?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, it depends. If you have all the material available, it would take about, and you're starting from scratch, it takes about a week to do it with a group of 4 people. But if you have a lot of experience doing it and you have your materials already gathered, then you could do it in a couple days. So it's, you know, Native people didn't just go into an area and say, oh, we got to build a lodge and just start from there. They didn't do it that way. They always had things set up in advance and were able to reuse materials. And so they would be able to, you know, if you were living in the woods and being nomadic like that, you could do it in a day. You could literally go out, have your material and with a group of 4, have it built in a day. And even less if you were carrying the material with you that you know, like, so, but typically in the year long, it takes about a month for them to build a lodge because what really is difficult is working together, having 4 people work together, they're living together, and to be able to function and make decisions and follow through and get everything going. It's quite a process. And so I would say that 2 weeks would be from an experienced group, and about a month when people are just first learning how to do it.
Okay, so it's not only building the wigwam and collecting the materials, but it's also the social point.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, Christian has a question, and he said he heard that living in round rooms without edges is special. How does that feel? What is so special about that? Do you have?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah. You know, and I learned this from Moni, the elder. She shared a story with me. She said that what's so special about being in a wigwam is that, you know, the sky is a globe above us. And when you go into your wigwam, you're living in a globe. And it's like you never really go inside. You're really still there. And it really is like that. It's a really beautiful feeling to be in this spherical space. You know, it's what we experience when we're living outside, and it's the same thing going into a wigwam. So they didn't really regard wigwams as houses. They were just, you know, the womb to go into to be protected from the elements when they needed it. So, yeah, great question.
Yeah, and a beautiful answer to that. Mm-hmm. Then Monique has the question how the cap of the grass lodge was made.
How was the hat?
Yeah,
top?
I think that's what she meant.
Yeah, that was basically taking saplings of small trees and making small hoops and making a small cone and then putting the grass on top of that. And then we took on the very top, you take a big clump of grass and we just lashed it together and set that right on top so that it would cover. Okay. And then for the very top, we took a bundle of grass and we just bent it over to cover the very, very top so that no water would go down the middle of the cone. Does that make sense? So
it's the cone, then on top the bunch of grass cap, and then the bent grass.
Yeah, at the very top we put a bent, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, yeah. At least for me it's clear. I hope Monique will ask if she didn't understand that.
Well, I didn't say this, but I'm in the process of writing a book on these shelters, and it's going to have all the details in there. Some of the notes that you saw I had there, I've got probably 40 pages of those notes of all the different things. And so not yet, but it's coming.
Yeah, let us know when it's out.
Yeah, sure.
There's another question that might be answered in your book, but now it's not out yet. So yeah. The 2-layer type, the winter wigwam, needs a moisture barrier at the bottom as well, I guess. Only at the outer layer or at the inner one? That's what.
Yeah, that's a good question. And yeah, outer layer is all you really need. You don't, and it's not as important for the winter lodges because in our winter, it's very dry. It snows and the snow stays frozen the whole winter, the whole time you're using it. So in the springtime, it all melts off, but we're not using that lodge in the spring. We leave that lodge. And then that lodge is in the summertime, it's always opened up. The material is brought out and re-dried and new materials added to it so that you keep the insulation well. So it requires a rebuild every summer. And so you would get all that moisture would dry out. So you don't really need a moisture barrier for that lodge.
Okay. Yosha was just writing in the chat that you might be the most experienced wigwam builder in North America.
I could be. I don't know of anybody. I go to a lot of museums, or I did, to go study them, and I was always disappointed in that there's not a lot of knowledge displayed there. So, yeah, you learn by living in them, really. You build it and then you live in it and you find out what works and what doesn't. And then you go back and build again. And then you keep you keep learning more by experience. And yeah, 25 years or almost 25 years. And I've lived a number of years, and I hope Yosha shares this with you, but Yosha and I lived in a winter wigwam. We shared a fire in a wigwam for a whole winter. And we spent that whole winter crafting our dream work. So yeah, that was a really important time for me.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, and that's the reason why if anybody of you listeners has any more questions, so feel free to ask, because that's one experience in your lifetime to ask Abel here. I've got one further question by now. Also about the construction. Christian asked if he wrote, in the pictures of the wigwams, the bark didn't look wind and waterproof because of the gaps in the roof. How are they constructed in detail that they are proof? You said something about overlapping, but maybe you've got some more tips for us.
Well, yeah, it does appear that you have these gaps between the bark and that would catch wind. There's a couple things we do to help mitigate that. One is that when we put the panels on the lodge, we put them in the direction that the storm winds come from, so that when we have strong winds, it's going to be going with the direction of the panels and not from the side where it can catch wind. So that's one thing that we do. But the other is that the shape of the wigwam, this is a spherical shape, is really well designed for wind to flow over that shape. And so you have very little wind resistance that gathers, even with the gaps. And so in all my time and all the storms that I've been through in those wigwams, I've never had a problem where they've ripped off or been torn off. In fact, I've never seen it happen even when I'm not living in them in all my time here. So they're very secure in the wind. It's an amazing shelter that can deal with wind.
Yeah. Good to know this too. Cool. Thanks for these additions, Abel.
Yeah. That's a great question too. I would have asked the same thing if I saw that.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks a bit like that. There's one further question that came up also from Christian. I don't really understand it. I just read it. Maybe you understand what he means. Technical aspect, the bar could not be bended in two directions. So I think that leads to the design.
Yeah, that's a great, I know what you're saying. Yes, right. Very good. Okay, so yes, you have a spherical shape that you're putting on a two-dimensional shape on top of, and it will bend one way. You know, it'll arch real well, but it won't do the shape of a sphere. And that is why when we're putting on the bark, you put it in arches. So it's going to be, you know, you can't just put it flat on the surface. Otherwise, the top's going to have a big gap. Or if you put that on the top, lay that flat, the bottom will have a big gap. So it's put on in an arc. And I didn't show that very carefully in the pictures. That I do have pictures that show that. I could do more follow-up with somebody if they're interested in seeing how that's done. But yeah, that's part of the puzzle of putting on the panels. You're putting on a flat panel on a three-dimensional shape, and you have to figure out how do you get it on there where you have the least amount of exposure. And that's something you learn by doing. But yeah, we have a lot of experience with that.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. So Yosha, you spotlighted yourself. I'm giving the word to you.
Yes. Hey, Abel, there's so many memories coming up. It's great. Thank you for the for leading us into that again, and just showing to some of the people who've never had the privilege to live in one of these wigwams, to just get a glimpse of what that might be like. And I mean, you probably spent, I mean, I know you spent at least a couple of years living in wigwams, and probably if you count it all together, even more than that. Like, I'm curious, can you pinpoint some things, like what it means to you to live in a wigwam, like not so much the technical of how to build it, but what tracks did it leave in you to live in a structure like that?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest impact in my life is this, you know, we're so used to going into our houses or apartments, and if you grow up in that, like I did, you think that's normal. Like, it's normal to go into a house, and that's just the way it is. And it's so, a house is, you know, you go from your bedroom to the kitchen, for example. It's all within the shelter, right? But that's not how our ancestors lived, and it's not how we are capable of living. When you're living in the woods outside, you're outside. There's no inside. And the lodge is just, it's the space that you go to for when you need shelter. And you need shelter at certain times. You need shelter for rest, for example. When you want rest and recuperation, we need to have shelter from the air moving, from moisture, from sound, you know, that allows us to go into a deep rest and get our rest and rejuvenation. And so the lodge is outside. And so when you go from being out, let's say I'm cooking outside and I'm eating, I'm outside. And then when I go to the lodge, it's still really, you know, I'm going into a lodge, I'm going into a shelter, but it's outside. And you get used to that very quickly. Like, you realize that, oh, a house isn't really necessary for us to find comfort. I always believed that, oh, without a house, I wouldn't be, you know, it wouldn't be safe and it wouldn't be comfortable, and I would be yearning for a house all the time. But when you live in a wigwam and you live outside, you very quickly get used to that, and it becomes a new normal. And it just changes your paradigm shift about like how you can live. And that's really empowering. And also it's actually even preferred. I would prefer to be able to live in a wigwam if I could do that, but you know, I can't. But so yeah, I feel blessed for the amount of time I've sat down and tried to figure it out. It's like between 4 and 5 years of actually living in a wigwam at different times in my life. And it has had a profound impact on how I view the world and myself in it.
Yeah, it's so amazing to me how when we first start living more in the nature without a house, how we are thinking and perceiving this as discomfort. And then over time, slowly but surely, suddenly being in an actual house is more discomfort for you because you're missing the connection, the wind and the smells and all of that. What comes up to me, like one of my deepest memories to living like this is when I'm entering the winter wigwam, and the whole floor is like this thick, laid out with the spruce dark green needles, or the balsam fir needles, and just that scent, that smell of the etheric oils that comes into my nose, and the calming effect that had on my psyche. I mean, to this day, I can just smell it, and I'm right there again.
Yeah.
And then you start to miss that when you're in a house where it's almost like not breathing, especially these new houses with the new energy standards and stuff like that.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, the other thing too. Oh, well, I wanted to just add one more thing to that. You know, when you live outside, your body adjusts, your body knows how to do that. And so when you go from outside into the lodge, you're still breathing the same air. It's got the same moisture, the same smells, the same, well, there's lodge smells, but you're not having to adjust. When I go from outside into a house, oftentimes I'm going from a high humidity and my nose and all my sinuses are working with that. And then I go into a house that has central air and the air is really dry and my body has to adjust to that. And so it's really impactful when you see the difference of that and how that affects us.
Yeah, good point. And just to touch on briefly, because you have a background as a physics teacher as well, and I remember a long time ago that I heard you say something. Maybe you can just relate to that for a second. The energy efficiency, because that's something that people nowadays always wonder about. With the energy efficiency of these round shelter structures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, yeah, that could be a whole long conversation, but I'll tell you the amount of material to make a wigwam is the most efficient to do this shape. You get the most amount of volume and usable space in a sphere. So, and one thing I didn't point out is that these wigwams are actually a sphere. If you can imagine, it goes below the ground too. We actually build it so that it's slightly above halfway of the sphere. So you get this shape like that rather than straight up from the middle of the sphere. And that gives you a lot more usable space in the lodge. These lodges don't look very big, but they are about 10 feet in diameter, 3 meters in diameter. So, yeah, about 3 meters in diameter, but you could easily sit 12 people around the perimeter and everybody can, we do this often, like when it's raining, we all pick a wigwam to go into and we sit around and we share stories and we're working on things together and projects or writing letters. And it's a really neat, tight space, but it's like, it feels spacious. The other thing that's really good, when you're heating that space, it's very efficient to heat. So you have these different layers of heat. So you have like where you're sitting by the fire, you have that radiant heat from the fire and it feels really nice. It's like being outside, but you're inside. And so you get that heated up and everybody is very comfortable around the fire, but up above, it's very hot up there. So it could be 30 degrees warmer up on the top. Am I doing that right with Celsius? Let's see, 30. Yeah, that's quite a big change, right? So, you come out, you've been outside all day, you're hiking in the snow, your pants are frozen wet, and you got, all this wet gear. You come in, you hang it up there on the top of the lodge, and it's dry within 15, 20 minutes. And it's, very useful, different aspects. But yeah, the physics of the sphere and living in a sphere is the most efficient.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also that just there's no corners where it's like hard to warm the cold air and things. Well, one other thing that comes up to me is also that I don't know how you perceive this, but when I first began to live in a wigwam in a shared space with a few other people, I had this issue with the lack of privacy, like suddenly I had other people around me all the time. But then after living like that for such an extended time, when I got back to house living, I felt super lonely going to bed in my own room. Like suddenly I was there alone in a room, and this room felt so big and square, and I knew my friends were in another room over there. Yeah. And so what I actually did was like I knocked on their door, and that was right after my year long, and I asked them if it, like I said basically, hey, I don't want to be weird here, but would it be okay if I just lay myself on the floor of your bed and sleep there? And they were like a little confused. Yeah. But then actually I ended up sleeping on the bed on the floor, like a dog basically. Yeah. But I felt so much more connected to my tribe through doing that again. And I did not want to have a room for myself anymore. Yeah. How is this for you? Is that?
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying there. And, you know, I have experienced that a lot. You know, in the transition, we get so able to used to what we're doing. You know, now you know, I sleep in the bedroom on my own. I'm perfectly comfortable with it. But yes, like there was a transition to getting used to sleeping with people, and then a transition to getting used to sleeping by yourself again. And, you know, we're remarkably, you know, capable of adjusting. But I want to go back to this idea of privacy in the lodge, because this is a very often asked question. Like, how do people give each other privacy when you're living together like that? And I asked that. I remember asking that very question to Tamarack. You know, like, and how do we get in privacy? And all he said to me, and this is often how Tamarack would work with me, he would just say one-liners or something and then walk off. And in this case, he said, Abel, privacy is all in the mind. And then he walked off, and I'm like, what does that mean? You know? So yeah, I think I spent like 10 years trying to answer that question. But really what I have learned is that we're actually really well designed to live in close proximity in shared spaces like that. And we provide privacy for each other as needed. Like if I'm in the lodge and I'm really struggling with something, maybe I had an argument with a loved one, and I'm just feeling all this stuff around it, and I need just space to be left alone and not interacted with. I'm working something out, right? Well, I'm expressing that in my body language, my facial expressions, how I'm interacting, and that's being communicated very, right? And the other people in my space pick up on that, and they understand, like, oh, Abel needs space right now. He's working on something out. And so they provide that privacy for me by not interacting with me, by going on about their business and as though I'm not affecting them. And that gives me the space to just be there and work out my whatever's going on in that time, right? So that's an example of how privacy is given. Or maybe there's a young couple in the lodge, and they're wanting to be intimate with each other. They want to, you know, touch each other and kiss or whatever. And I'm in the lodge with them. Well, I can afford giving them privacy by giving them that space, by not interjecting myself into that, you know, their action. And I just do what I'm doing. And I, you know, continue as though they're not there, perhaps. And that is giving them the privacy they need in order to be able to, you know, go through their experience. So this nonverbal communication that's happening all the time, when you live together, you really start picking that up. You start understanding what people are needing, and then you provide that for each other. And that's part of the experience of living in a circle of people, where everything you're doing is provided for each other with that group of people in the circle. And that's a big human experience. And this is part of what being immersed in nature and living together brings for you, is this understanding of how do we provide privacy for each other when it's needed.
Yeah, great answer, because that brings us also to the skill set to pick up on these cues and to listen and to be aware of your surroundings and what's happening. And yeah. And so what are some of the skill sets that you can think of that you learned, like skills, not like building the wigwam, but from living in a wigwam? What are some of the skills that you can use in your daily life now that you think that you can track back to that lifestyle in a wigwam?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, what I just shared, you know, on the last question is a big part of that. But the other is when you live in a shared space, in a tight shared space like that, it's really important that you take responsibility for your space. Like when I go to sleep at night, I lay out my bedding, I get what I need out, and I set it up, and then I sleep in that space. But when I get up in the morning, it's really important to put that away and open the space back up for other people that may need it later. And so, for example, I get up in the morning and I roll my bedding up and I tuck it away. I have it up off the ground and out of the way so people could sit in that space. Well, then let's say it rains later that morning and we decide we're going to use the wigwam I'm sleeping in to hang out. Well, I want to make sure everybody's comfortable when they come in and not be sitting on my bed or my, my stuff. And so always thinking about your space and thinking ahead about how it's going to be used, and being proactive about that. That was a big lesson for me, because I tended to be, like a lot of people are, very lazy about my space because no one else was ever using it. So what was the point? I don't think I ever even made my bed, after my mom stopped telling me to do it. I just stopped making my bed. But now it's a ritual for me every morning to make my bed, because it reminds me of that time when I was living in the wigwam, where you do have to pay attention to everything you're doing, how you affect your area and how it's being potentially used. And that had a big life lesson for me, for sure.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that I mean, just we could go on and on, because that brings up so much. It's like when I think of that, like, where does that lead? It's like when I'm thinking of, we have so much nowadays, it's like everybody has these houses or apartments and like multiple rooms for yourself, and most people have a car, and just like we have such a tremendous wealth of stuff. And then at the same time, we're missing so much of the core, like fulfillment feelings, because of like not being involved with our core needs, like shelter or clothing or warmth. That's all provided by someone else to us. And so just like basically just looking at how this wealth of stuff brings also with it kind of like a poverty of something else. And then if you turn it around and suddenly, because from our modern perspective, you could look at this and say, oh man, this poor guy, he had to live in one small room with 3 other people, no privacy, he had to clean up all the time. But that's like all bad, because I want to have my space and I have all this energy usage there. But then just like the skill sets that and the richness that comes from that deprived state, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I think one of the biggest things that we're always looking at, or at least a lot of conversations I have with people about what are we missing in our lives? What are we searching for? Why are we interested in these outdoor schools and outdoor skills and all this? But and the big one that I think it is people, living with people. We're, we live with all the support of not having to really live with the same people over, throughout the whole day, every day, and for big times in our lives. We have separate social groups. We have a group of people that we work with. We have a group of people that we go spend time with, leisure time with, and we have people that our families members that we have, and our relationships with each of them are different, and not the same as if you are living with the same people, where you do need to be paying attention to the nonverbal communication. You do need to be paying attention to your communication, that that you're not speaking but you are exhibiting all the time. That experience is a part that I think we're missing a lot of. And the Wellness Guide program is completely designed to do that to you. It's like, and that's one of the reasons why it can be really challenging for people. You go in there and it's just the people. I've heard this many times before, like, oh, I can handle everything except for the people. I just can't stand having the same group. They're driving me crazy. And I hear that a lot, and it is challenging. I think all of us that have done the Wellness Guide program will say probably the most demanding part of the experience is living with the 5-6 people the whole year. You know, you could go out and gather firewood for 3 or 4 hours and come back, but there it is. You know, it's not a different group of people you're coming back to. They're not people that you would choose to be your friends necessarily. Like this is something that people don't realize. You join a group of people out in the woods, half of them are people you would never hang out with. You just be like, you know, no, I'm not going to deal with that person. No, they're there, and they're having the same problem with you. You know, you're like, you don't like them, they don't like you. You know, and one of the things that I have to preach right away with them is like, look, nobody's expecting you to like everybody. You know, you don't have to like your clanmate. You just have to respect them and honor them. And once you do that, once you are able to fully do that, then you start liking them. But it could take 9 months before that comes about. You could have 9 months in the year long where you're just this one person in the group just drives you crazy. You just, you'd love to see them go, but they don't. You know, so yeah, I think that is the biggest part of this idea of living together in a lodge. You know, it's just like it does force you to really have to think about and pay attention to, how am I affecting others and how am I being affected by the others, and how do we communicate our needs there? What is a need? What is a want? What's really doable? What do we need to learn to get used to? When do we know it's not appropriate or whatever? You know, all that you have to figure out. And we're like little tiny children, young children, trying to figure it out because we don't have much to draw upon in that experience. We grew up in a different, you know, cultural setting than that. So yeah, it's a big deal, and a big part of our humanness too. You know, that's.
Yeah, and also just like you know, so many of us are yearning for more connection, intimacy, and this feeling of belonging, especially with others. And yet it's like so much of our own behavioral stuff that comes in the way, you know, of experiencing that. And then to me, it seems that there's a very close connection between the wigwam living that you just shared about and these kind of skills and yearnings and getting closer to that. Not that it's like the only way, but it's right there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you know, the thing that in our cultures that most of us are experiencing and growing up in, we really do have to put on a front. You know, we have to play a certain role in order to belong to whatever situation we're in. And if we don't, we can often get marginalized and banished, and that's really painful. So we develop these skills to show up as a certain person, right? But that takes a lot of energy to do that. And so when you're living in a wigwam, in the Wilderness Guide experience with a wigwam, for example, you can't hold that front up. It because you just don't have the energy. And so that falls away. And then the real person shows up, you know, and oftentimes we don't even know who that real person is. And so we're shocked at our own behavior and how we're reacting and how we're responding to our environment, and it's quite a journey to go to do that. But yeah, it's a big part of being in the wigwam.
Yeah, and that is for another talk at another time.
Yeah, right. Definitely.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Abel. This was great. I love the being able to pull it off. Well, there's something else happening in a few minutes already. Is there something else you would like to add before we come to a closure here?
Yeah, the one thing I want to add is, you know, I heard the response, oh, that's a lot of information, and I don't know if you can do that. If you are interested in building a wigwam in your backyard, I would just say go for it. You know, take what you learned and just do it. Because there's no wrong way of doing it. You do it, and it's fun. You don't have to use all natural materials. You could go get, string at the hardware store. There's just so many ways you can get out there and do it. So I just encourage you to go for it and not worry about whether you're doing it right or wrong. It really doesn't matter. Go do it. If you got kids, go sleep in the backyard in it. See if you could go through a rainstorm in it. I mean, whatever, just go for it and see what you learn from it. And be proud of it, because it'll be awesome. So.
All right.